there's lots to discuss because, as we've heard, especially just from Ofcom recently, just a couple minutes ago, viewing habits are changing such that social media is rivaling TV as a news source, but also as an entertainment source. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So, fantastic panel. We've got, just to my right, Drennan, who's the MD and founder of Nest Productions, Shayna Waldman, Development and Production Executive at the ATS team, and Dhanny Joshi, MD of Big Deal Films. And thank you all so much for being here. From your perspective, how has youth consumption changed in recent years? And Derek, why don't you start us off?
Oh, cheers. How is it? I mean, I run a TV production company, and fundamentally, I always look at content as a viewer myself. I'm actually Generation X, which is a very confusing in between Y and millennials, where we had the internet and we had mobile phones, but a bit later on. So things have changed. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because like baby boomers had TV, millennials had the internet, and Gen Z have TikTok. But ultimately, if we boil it down, it's just all content, isn't it? And I actually think that we shouldn't categorize it too much. I think we should be thinking about it as a whole, rather than just putting everything into a different bracket. Obviously, different generations want different things, but even on the different platforms like TikTok, YouTube, they're all really different in terms of what content that people want from that. I think that's fundamentally what's changed, is that we need to think about content as one thing, but in loads of different spectrums, basically.
Short form, long form.
Short form, everything. It's everything, and I don't think it's ever going to go away either. I think also, I find it really interesting that habits change. Like, I'm more Gen Z than Gen X. My dad is on TikTok, and he's a baby boomer, so it's really interesting that I think over time we sort of change into different mindsets with content.
Yeah, Shayna, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think as technology is advancing so quickly, it's changing the entire landscape, the entire industry. Of course, we always think about like, oh, well, where is Gen Z? What are they doing? What are they watching? But I think to a certain degree, we almost forget that like they didn't grow up with TV in the way that millennials did, the way that Gen X did, the way that boomers did. So it's never been the place that they got their content. They've grown up in a digital way, so I think that they are more comfortable without even thinking about it, going direct to whatever app works best for them, whether it be Snapchat, TikTok, streaming platforms. I think Netflix has done a really good job of cutting through. A lot of the other more traditional platforms that have gone into streaming, I think, have struggled in that way because they're trying to change what they do to sort of make themselves appeal to Gen Z. And it's just not the way they consume content.
Oh, we're just getting the mic here.
You need to say that again.
The whole thing, or where do we leave off? Is it in and out? Okay. Okay. Well, I don't know where that cut me off. But yeah, as I was saying, Gen Z are on all of these apps. They don't go to traditional models and platforms the same way older generations do. And so I think we've just seen that shift, and I think we need to just understand that they are a digital generation. And so I think we always compare them to other generations that have always gotten their content differently. But for them, it's not different. That's just the way they've grown up.
Dhanny, what do you think's driving Gen Z to use platforms and some of this consumer behavior change? Is it that the platforms have algorithms that are sort of feeding that content to them, or is it actually that the content itself is different and unique in what young people want?
Yeah, so can you guys hear me? Yeah? Oh, brilliant. Okay, cool. So I look at Gen Z, and I know I think Gen Z is a very broad term, and it can be broken up in a few demographics within themselves. So how they consume content, you could argue the older Gen Z guy, demographic, like more compelling storylines, so they go for that. Now, what platform they go to for that could be different. It could be YouTube, it could be TikTok. They just want to be fed an authentic perspective, and they want high production value, and they want to be engaged. And so I think you treat that part of Gen Z as, you give them a certain treatment, or you feed their need for content in a certain way. You've got the younger Gen Z team who like that high, fast-paced, engaging content. They're plugged into the creator economy perhaps more than any of the others. And so I think it's just how they consume content in two different ways, and you feeding that. I definitely think algorithmically, I hope I said that right, the social platforms dictate all that. So I think you just feed them in different ways, and we're led by them. The need for content hasn't changed. The need for content is higher than ever. How we consume it is different, but I don't think there's one better approach or another. I think you let the social media platforms dictate what that is, and you super serve them. And that's one thing as well. I think with these platforms, with tech coming in, they hyper-personalize the content to feed the demographic, right? So I think you just got to embrace that and have your content feed the audience you're trying to get to.
I think the most common thing about it all is that they just want content now, and they can get it now on the phone or on the tablet or whatever. And I think that's the biggest change.
Is that part of why there's so much second screening?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think so. But yeah, possibly, yeah. But if you think about it, like years ago, on a Sunday night, I would watch Heartbeat. Don't judge me, but it was every Sunday night, and we just all sit down as a family and watch it. And that doesn't really exist for that generation anymore. And it's really interesting that there's a constant need for just, I want content now, and I need to have it. And I think this generation are watching more content than anyone else before, at a really rapid scale.
From a production standpoint, Shayna, I know you work on a lot of unscripted work. Is there a difference between how production teams and the broadcasters that are commissioning those projects should be considering unscripted versus scripted productions when trying to create shows that target younger audiences?
I think as it relates to between unscripted or scripted, Gen Z obviously watch both. I think when it comes to unscripted, the things that I think are seeing over and over again is, and I think it's one of the reasons why they are going to YouTube and TikTok, is a level of authenticity. And I think what can happen a lot in scripted as well, but in unscripted, your first season feels authentic, and then the more it progresses, there often becomes like a level of sort of inauthenticity, or that it's almost like too overly it feels almost scripted, or
you get people that are clout chasing to get on television.
Yeah, exactly.
To be a bit crass about it.
Yeah, I think if you use the latest Love is Blind as an example, I think you see that a lot. I am a Love is Blind watcher. I love reality TV, always have. But you do, and that's just a challenge of the genre as a whole, rather than it being for Gen Z or other generations. But Gen Z really want authenticity. I think certainly millennials, Gen X, that sort of grew up with traditional television and then got access to the digital world sort of later on. We, there's a level of like where it's still a bit of a novelty almost. For Gen Z, it's expected, it's anticipated. They can make content quickly, they can get content quickly. So they want, just like Derek said, they want it now. And the reason why those platforms are so successful is because they are hyper-personalized. And the amount of time that it takes you to get on the platform and into watching something is so much quicker than any of the other platforms. But I think in terms of the genre as a whole, it's certainly authenticity. And I think they, as a generation, value that almost arguably sometimes more than production value, certainly in reality TV, which is why some of these like long form, they're not even programs, but content creators, something will hit online and then we'll try to turn it into a format or a longer doc or something like that, and it won't hit the same way because there's something that feels not inauthentic, but it's like, oh no, that story's already happened, like we're almost past it. And it's nice maybe for older generations to watch it and go, okay, what was that about? But the younger generations are going, well, I can get that now. I can watch it in real time as it's happening. And I think that is something that
I think scripted is hard. Like I sort of do a bit of both, but script is a lot harder, I think, generally. And I think in terms of second screen, I've heard that what this generation are doing is they're actually just putting subtitles on the scripted shows that they're watching, and it means that if they're on the phone, they can sort of look up and keep up to date with what's actually happening on the script, on the drama, which is really interesting. So more and more this generation are just using subtitles, not for the reason that people of my generation used it for.
To pay attention to something else at the same time.
So interesting, isn't it?
I think there's definitely an era now of casual viewer, and I'm hearing that Netflix are actually now targeting the casual viewer as part of their strategy. So you have to prepare for that. And I'd say, so just on the scripted point as well, because we've had a very different experience with, we did a show called Dreaming Whilst Black, and it might be a helpful example as to what we did there. It was a web series that existed online. They went to all the broadcasters, no one wanted to touch it, production companies didn't want to touch it, and we saw it, only had about 10, 15,000 views, but it had a very unique perspective. It was authentic, and it mattered. Now, this is for a generation that couldn't get on TV. We optioned it, we took it to the networks, Netflix said, didn't feel it was big enough, Channel 4 didn't think it was big enough, pitched it to the BBC, they commissioned a script, we made the script, pitched it in, we got the green light for the pilot, we made the pilot, we deficited it ourselves, and this is something that existed on YouTube only. No TV channel would touch it. We put our own money in, made a huge loss, but the pilot, because it was so authentic and it spoke of the black experience, TikToks were made about it, Instagram Reels were made about it. It ended up winning a BAFTA and an RTS award. It was a huge sign to the industry about where they should be attracting where they should be attracting viewers, where they should be attracting talent. We got green light for the series. We ended up partnering with A24, the American studio. Last year, it was the most sold British show in British television. But something that existed online first, and we still catered to it. As part of our marketing, we made sure we utilised TikTok. For CBC, the network in Canada, they used TikTok first to debut it. They created all the assets around it. It made the noise for the show before it even went on air. So when people did watch it, they were all plugged into the characters, to the viral scenes, and we just had the second season greenlit by Showtime. So,
congrats.
Thank you.
What I'm hearing is that there's a level of actually being complementary between platforms and TV.
Yep.
That oftentimes at these conferences there's a bit more of that butting head conflict, but there's a suggestion here that actually maybe these could be working together as opposed to rivaling each other. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, they shouldn't be competing because they all serve different purposes, but they should be working together. If you put TV and streaming one side and social media platforms on the other, they're never gonna. You have to just embrace that they both serve the purpose and they should work together. You're never going to beat the social media platforms because they can always go faster, quicker. They can turn things around, as Shayna just said. And so you have to embrace that and use that to your advantage. And from the outset, when you're creating a show, start building the community from now. If you had a show like Top Boy that was on Netflix, if you had an offshoot character and you started building their world on TikTok first, by the time Top Boy comes out, you're going to already have an invested fan base in that one character, and you can absolutely serve that. So there's no doom and gloom here. This is the best time to be in content. Is it difficult? Is it different? Yes, but opportunities are there.
Does the rest of the panel agree with that, or is there a little bit more
absolutely.
combative?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've only got a couple more minutes left. I wanted to also get at, and you mentioned this earlier, that you, even though you're Derek, you're Gen X, that you actually act more like a millennial, and even your parents do as well. We talked
more Gen Z.
You're probably more Gen Z than I am in
It's
terms
weird.
of
Like
media
I
consumption.
sometimes get really confused because on Sunday, I literally sat on TikTok for about 5 hours.
Right,
And
okay.
I didn't watch any TV. And I was like, I'm basically Gen Z.
That,
So,
apparently.
yeah.
So I guess to that point, should we be thinking not just in terms of what is Gen Z watching, but also how are older generations sort of taking on attributes
This is my
of
point.
Gen
It's
Z?
like, I just think there's we just box it off too much. I think we should just be thinking about it as one big thing, being diverse, inclusive, also just forgetting about, like, because actually Gen Z, I asked my own niece and nephew, what generation are you? They don't have a clue. They don't even, they don't understand it. It's a term that we're all using in the TV industry to try and define it, but actually there's so much crossover. And as I was saying, my own dad, who goes on TikTok, he's 70, and he watches golf on there, and that's where he gets all his golf. And actually, it's all about community, isn't it? It's all about connecting everyone up in a different way, and like so that he can go down to golf and talk about what he's watched on TikTok.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. It's not one mold fits anyone anymore. There's such a crossover. But also, I do believe that the younger audience, as they move up, their brain shifts and they become more mature. So therefore, they might want to take on longer form content as they get older.
I do want to press, we're time's flashing, but I did want to just address Generation Alpha is coming up. They're 14 years old at the older age. They're almost entering that sort of 16 to 34 bracket. We'll go down the line, starting with Dhanny and coming back. What's one thing to think about as Generation Alpha is coming up? Is it more of the same of what we've been talking about in terms of how Gen Z is viewing, or do you expect that generation to actually do things a little differently themselves?
I think they have a subculture within themselves that, I'll be honest with you, I want to position myself as an expert on the Gen Alpha. I'm still learning, right? So there's a whole subculture within themselves that we need to stay tuned for. But I do think it's decentralized as much as it can be, and so we just got to go for the ride.
Shane?
Yeah, I think one thing I want to just stress for Gen Alpha as an industry as well is like just in terms of how we want to shape the content that Gen Alpha are going to consume or are consuming, is that the way that content can shift and change your learning brain especially, there is a danger with that. So I think that we should also just be mindful not to address or lean into the way that their brains are forming by being on their iPads so often or consuming content so quickly that we are creating brains that need things so quickly, and second screen and third screen and all this, and sort of like, what does that look like? Where does that end? And I think that we should all sort of be thinking about, how do we slow them down? How do we fix the attention issue?
Derek, final words.
It's interesting that Gen Alpha, I don't think anyone really knows where it's going to go. No one has a crystal ball, do they? But
They're going to be watching it in the car as someone, as
yeah,
the car
exactly.
driver itself.
But I think it's about, I mean, I know that a lot of broadcasters follow the stats, and it's basically, in a nutshell, just following the audience, aren't you? Where they're going to go next? Who knows? We don't know. And I think it's the companies who will survive are the ones that stay on top of where their audiences are, basically.
Well, that's a great way to end it. Dhanny, Shayna, Derek, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.